They say Virginia is for lovers. Well, from recent news, it appears Virginia is for gun lovers. So let's take a look at 3 things all Americans can learn from the recent events in the Old Dominion. Next on the Constitution Study.
Every day, we're everyday Americans. Hold our own and call it home. Put it all on a little piece of land. Pay the bills, stay out of jail. Love the neighbors and have a few good friends. Every day, we're everyday Americans.
Hello there, everyday Americans. Paul Engel here with the Constitution Study, where we read and study the Constitution, and we teach the rising generation to be free. I am glad you could join me today. As always, I'm going to point you to the website, constitutionstudy.com. You can find everything I'm working on. The book is in good shape. Still waiting on publishing dates, but we're working on it. Obviously, I'm still doing the podcast. The store is open. I'm actually starting to do more speaking requests, including online requests. I do online webinars. So if you'd like me to speak to one of your groups, head over to the website. Under events, just click on speaking requests, and you can tell me about your event. We'll see what we can set up. Most of all, I want to thank everybody that helps share this message and help support the work that I'm doing here. Trying to keep everything up and running is a lot of work. I enjoy it, though, because I like spending time helping other people understand the Constitution. And I hope you'll come alongside and you'll join me as we start looking towards a new year. With that, let's start taking a look at what's going on in Virginia. Now, the news, well, it's been very interesting. Now, I am no expert in Virginia politics. However, as I've followed the news, I do see 3 things that I think, well, all Americans should learn from what's been going on in the last few weeks. So to give you a little background, on November 5th, 2019, the Commonwealth of Virginia elected a majority of Democrats to both the state House and Senate. Now, these soon-to-be seated representatives have pre-filed a series of gun control measures that infringe on the rights of Virginia gun owners. Measures they have submitted for the 2020 legislative session include HB 2, SB 12, and SB 70. They require a background check for all firearms transfers. Note I say firearms transfers, not firearms sales. So that means if you want to lend your gun to your neighbor or to your nephew, you have to go through a background check. HB 9 and SB 67 create a $250 fine for not reporting a lost or stolen firearm within 24 hours. HB 78 prohibits the possession of a firearm by those who have been convicted of certain misdemeanor violations. SB 13 makes it a Class 1 misdemeanor to possess or transport a firearm within the Capitol Square. SB 14 bans any device that increases the rate of fire of a semi-automatic firearm. SB 15 makes it a Class 1 misdemeanor to possess or transport a firearm in a building owned or leased by the Commonwealth. SB 16 expands the definition of assault firearm and prohibits its possession, sale, or manufacture. The bill also bans magazines designed to hold more than 10 rounds or shotguns that hold more than 7 rounds. SB 18 requires a person to be 21 years old to purchase a firearm. SB 22 and SB 69 limit the purchase of handguns to 1 in a 30-day period. SB 35 allows localities to prohibit the possession of a firearm or ammunition in a public space during a permitted event. And SB 71 adds public, private, or religious preschool and daycare centers to the list of locations where firearm possession is prohibited. Now, while this list is a small fraction of the bills that have already been filed in the state legislature, they represent a veritable wish list of measures meant to control people who keep and bear arms. Yes, it doesn't control guns, they control people. Now, these pieces of legislation, well, they've caused a bit of an uproar, not only in the Virginia gun owner community, but in many of its counties as well. Now, as of the recording of this episode, the organization Keep VA 2A reports that 88%, that's 84 of their counties, 10 cities and 11 towns, have designated themselves as Second Amendment sanctuaries. Now, some of these entities have passed resolutions, while others have passed ordinances. Some counties have stated they will refuse to enforce unconstitutional laws, while others prohibit the use of county funds to assist in enforcing laws that violate the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. While all of what appears to be a grassroots effort is impressive, what can the rest of us learn from these events? Well, the first thing we should learn is that elections have consequences. See, when I was asked by a Virginian what I thought about recent events in Virginia, my initial reaction was, well, this is an excellent example of trying to shut the barn door after the horses have gotten out. See, while the turnout at the local and county meetings had been quite impressive and record-breaking, we should not forget that the people of these same counties elected the representatives that are proposing the infringements on their rights in the first place. Now, I don't know if it was a lack of turnout in these counties that sent rights-hating representatives to Richmond, or believing that what politicians are saying. Whatever the case, whatever the reason, these representatives were chosen by the citizens of the Commonwealth of Virginia. We often talk about our right to vote, but we rarely talk about our duty to do so wisely. What I do think is that if a fraction of the energy currently expended to protect the rights of Virginians had been spent in getting to know their candidates, then turning up to vote for the one most willing to support the Constitution, well, maybe the Second Amendment sanctuary movement would not have been necessary. The second thing I think we should learn is that rule of law matters. Now, there has been some pushback from Roanoke. The lieutenant governor said he was not swayed by the wave of counties declaring themselves Second Amendment sanctuaries. He said people should remain focused on common sense measures, even if they infringe on rights protected by the constitutions he has sworn to support. Virginia Representative Jerry Connolly told the Washington Examiner, quote, "I would hope they either resign in good conscience because they cannot uphold the law which they are sworn to uphold, or they're prosecuted for failure to fulfill their oath," close quote. Well, what Mr. Connolly and apparently many in Virginia government fail to realize is that the oath of office taken by law enforcement officers includes supporting the Constitution of the United States and of their state. See, not only do law enforcement, but every member of government, executive, judicial, and yes, even the legislative branch, Mr. Representative Connolly, well, you're required to include in your oath to swear or affirm support to the U.S. Constitution. It's there. It has to be. Article 6, Clause 3 of the U.S. Constitution says, the senators and representatives before mentioned and the members of the several state legislatures and all executive judicial officers, both of the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support this Constitution. So I have only one question for those calling for dismissal, cutting off funds, or in one case even suggesting calling out the National Guard against those who are standing up for their citizens' rights. Are you really willing to punish those who will not enforce laws that are blatantly unconstitutional? You see, every one of the proposed laws I listed, well, it infringes on the rights of everyday law-abiding American citizens, their right to keep and bear arms. That is something strictly prohibited by the very constitutions, plural, you will swear or affirm to support. See, the U.S. Constitution Amendment, Second Amendment says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And Article 1, Section 13 of the Virginia Constitution says that a well-regulated militia composed of the body of the people trained in arms is the proper, natural, and safe defense of a free state. Therefore, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Seems pretty simple to me. So you have people in the counties standing up saying, we're going to uphold our oath because our oath places the Constitution above what you guys are doing. By the way, if you want to know where, Article 6, Section 2 of the Constitution says it's the supreme law of the land. Now, the third thing we need to remember from this is not the first time something like this has happened. See, lost in this struggle over the right to keep and bear arms is a little piece of history called the battles of Lexington and Concord. See, people seem to have forgotten that these battles, which were the spark that set the Revolutionary War ablaze, were over gun control. The British had sent troops to take control of the militia's powder house in Concord, Massachusetts. Now, unlike today where we have a National Guard, the militia in the colonies consisted solely of what today is called the unorganized militia, all the armed citizens. Ordinary people who would answer the call to defend their rights and their neighbors. And now, the central government was sending the military to confiscate their weapons and ammunition. Is that what you think of when you hear of elected officials in the state capitol threaten to use the state police and the National Guard, the military, to deprive citizens of their own state or their firearms and their ammunition? At dawn on April 19, 1775, a British military force was met by the colonial militia on the Lexington Green. When the British commander ordered the militia to lay down their arms and disperse, their commander, a Captain John Parker, is quoted as saying, "Stand your ground. Don't fire unless fired upon. But if they mean to have war, let it begin here." I asked the politicians in Roanoke, are you willing to stand in the face of your fellow citizen and order them to lay down their arms? Are you prepared for the response you might get and the war that might ensue? I asked the citizens of Virginia, have you learned your lesson? Are you going to put more time and effort into selecting representatives who will uphold their oath to support the Constitution of the United States and of the Commonwealth of Virginia? Or are you prepared to follow John Parker's advice? Are you willing to let war begin in your hometowns because you are unwilling to fulfill your duty to elect honorable men and women to public office? Men and women that would protect your rights rather than try to protect you from them. And to all Americans who are blaming the politicians in Roanoke for this mess, remember they are only there because the citizens of Virginia placed them there. They hired them to be their representatives, to wield their power in their name. So before we go pointing the finger at the politicians, we should also point it at the citizens who placed them there. See, we should all learn to choose our elected representatives more wisely, or we will one day be standing before a ruling class ordering us not only to lay down our arms, but lay down our rights as well. So what do you think about that one? Have you thought about the fact that although Virginia is going through this, I believe, wonderful grassroots movement to protect the Second Amendment, they're a bit late. But then again, better late than never. So I'm happy for what they're doing, but I hope the rest of us, the other 49 states, will learn a lesson that if we want to avoid this brouhaha with sanctuary cities, let's hire elected representatives that will protect our rights, not infringe on our rights. Let's learn from what's going on in Virginia and not repeat it in Tennessee and Washington and Oregon and Texas and New York and Oklahoma. Let's learn from what's happening in Virginia. Anyway, head over to the website, constitutionstudy.com. Maybe buy a book. I'd love that. You can donate to the work that I'm doing here. Hey, ask a question. Fill out a little form. Tell me what your question is. I'll do my best to answer it. This actually started from someone who asked this question, which, well, this isn't strictly based on the question, on one person's question. It was those questions that gave me the idea that maybe I should talk about this with you. Most of all, share what we're doing. Join the live stream the second Thursday of every month at 6 p.m. Central Time. I broadcast live on Facebook. Join me. If you have other places you'd like me to speak, please do so. I'm always looking forward to that type of work. Most of all, I hope you learned something, and I hope you enjoyed it enough that you'll come back and I can see you again next time on the Constitution Study.
You have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from a long through line of everyday American.